Good afternoon. This morning, at approximately 10:43 a.m., officers from the Cape Coral Police Department responded to a welfare check at 1919 Southwest 2nd Terrace. This was an attempt to contact a male identified as Joseph Bekermis, 31 years of age, from 1919 Southwest 2nd Terrace in Cape Coral. This was to evaluate Mr. Bekermis for a potential Baker Act. According to his family, Mr. Bekermis was in a manic state. Officers were confronted by Mr. Bekermis immediately as he exited his residence through an open garage door of the home. Officers on the scene attempted to create distance and de-escalate the situation. However, Mr. Bekermis brandished a metal pipe and aggressively approached our officers in an irate and an aggressive manner. Officers continued with de-escalation attempts, tried to create distance to resolve the incident. Two of the three officers that were on the scene deployed less lethal tasers, but they were rendered ineffective. Mr. Bekermis then swung the metal pipe at an officer, striking him in the head, causing a severe injury and a laceration to the side of the officer's head. Still armed with the weapon, as the officer that was struck began to stumble back, he then approached the officer again to continue his assault, raising the metal pipe for a second strike to his head. At that time, the officer shot Mr. Bekermis 3 times. The officers, still injured himself, began life-saving measures on Mr. Bekermis. However, he was declared deceased on the scene, and our officer was transported to a local emergency room for treatment. The officer, I can say, thankfully has been treated and he has been released at this moment. The State Attorney's Office will be partnering with us for a review of the lethal force investigation, and our officer will be on paid administrative leave, which we all know is standard protocol. I personally visited with our officer in the emergency room to check on his status, and I met with his family also. I also personally viewed the body-worn camera footage from today's incident, and I can tell you that our officers followed training and performed admirably under the most extreme circumstances. Our officers were confronted with a violent individual, made every attempt to de-escalate the situation and not get into a violent encounter, but sometimes the actions of others render that not a successful measure. And our officers were attacked with a deadly weapon right in the side of the head. Tried less lethal. Less lethal didn't work in this instance, and we had no choice but to utilize deadly force. We were met with deadly force, and we responded with deadly force. It's a short statement. The details are preliminary right now, but I will do my best to answer questions if you have them.
How many officers initially responded?
3.
But only one discharged a weapon?
Correct. 2 discharged a taser, 1 discharged a firearm.
Were any of the officers in this instance involved in March 29th?
No.
Are they the others still on leave?
No, they're not.
Do we have any previous history with the suspect that we know of at this time?
We do. We have numerous incidents in the past at this location, violent encounters. There's been instances where he's tried to take an officer's gun while being taken into custody for a Baker Act. When the address came out, many of our officers were immediately familiar with what they were potentially going into.
Any of the officers that maybe had previously responded to this residence before were there today?
I'm not sure if these 3 individual officers have, but officers on the shift have, and I would be, it wouldn't surprise me if any one of the 3 officers on scene today had been there in the past.
Has this suspect been tased or had used any force before within any of these other encounters?
We've had to utilize force to take him into custody for a Baker Act. He violently fought with our officers. Like I mentioned, he tried to take the officer's gun. In that instance, this morning, a family member came to the police department prior, inquiring about help. They've been in a desperate situation. Our officers went back to the home to try to assist, dealing with the family, and then were immediately confronted with a very violent encounter.
When will the body camera footage be released?
The body camera footage is actually evidence for the State Attorney's Office, so we'll be working in conjunction with Amira Fox and her team, and as soon as that As soon as they're able to release it, it'll be released.
And what was kind of the process leading up to, how was the guy's behavior as he came out of the garage?
He was shot out of a cannon, if I could describe it that way. We had an officer at the bottom of the driveway that created distance immediately. The two other officers were speaking with family on the side of the open garage door by the front door because of the violent nature, and was trying to attack one of the officers at the bottom of the driveway. When those officers came around the corner, he turned his attention to them. He's brandishing a large metal pipe. They attempted less lethal taser at that point, ineffective. Immediately rushed our officer, swung like a baseball bat, struck him right in the head, knocked him back, was coming in for a second shot, and that's when, and this is a rapid, dynamic, unfolding event, and he was shot by our officer at that point. And then immediately, they began life-saving measures to try to revive him.
Where was he shot?
Where,
The suspect?
where on his
Yeah.
body?
Yes.
I don't have that information. I saw the video. It doesn't really pinpoint it that way. But it looked to be center mass, which is what we train for. We don't train to shoot any particular body part. We shoot to stop the threat, and the target that we acquire is center mass. So I would venture to say that we met that.
The taser, did he have too much clothes on? Is that what, or was it his mental state that kind of made it?
I really don't know at this point. That'll be part of the evaluation to see. It could be that it's such a dynamic and fluid moving situation that you didn't get both probes on. It could be that both were in clothing, like you said. It could be a mental state. It could be a combination of all those things, but it's too early for us to tell at this point.
Could it be drugs too? I mean, if he was on a special kind of drug, could that render it?
It could be, but I'm not an expert to be able to say that, but that's going to be part of the evaluation.